I have bad news. So I was doing a massive multiplayer online role-playing game, and if you guys follow this channel, I was planning to release a video every day of me doing it. And yesterday I did not release the video. So today I was thinking, I'm gonna record 2 videos, and of course I'll keep the an hour limit a day, but I'm gonna just split this thing into 2 videos. And the problem is that today's video would be this beginning of the code, like where I actually put start to write the game itself. But it's here, as you can see. I have a massive a server up and running here that I just recorded, like with help and stuff like that, with a tick. I can key the game and do a lot of stuff. And why it's a bad news? Because my microphone was not connected properly. And if you remember the first video, I had the same problem, not the same problem, I had a different problem, but related to audio. And this time, I actually have like an hour of recording of me creating the game. It's very interesting. It's like me going step by step on the server, but the audio just sucks a lot. Like the audio is terrible, literally terrible. So I decided, I was thinking, oh, we're gonna post it anyways because it's good, but then no, it's literally very bad. Leave in the comments if you want it. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and time lapse the an hour long of me developing stuff, and then I'm gonna go ahead and explain what I did here. Okay, so first of all, actually before the time lapse, for those who are interested to figure out how a massive multiplayer online server game server works, there's no online networking just yet. I'm doing that. But in a nutshell, let's figure out what's going on. I have a lot of Python files here. I'm already created, of course, in the previous videos because yes. But what I did here is create a base game server class that are gonna basically store the server, just like we planned before here in the previous videos. And you're gonna have a terminal interface, a connection listener, a TCP listener, and a tick. And in the first video that I recorded today and had a problem, I did the whole terminal interface pass. And in the last video that I recorded with the same audio problem, I had this. I wrote the tick part. But I'm gonna try to explain to you here as fast as I can to not waste your time. Okay, so I have a basic sock variable here that is nothing because there's no networking in the server game, which is weird, I know, but don't worry about that. And I have like a running variable with a running thread that are gonna like define if this is working or not. And I have getters and setters for this as well. And this is the first part of the video that I did. I recreated the running and a main run method here that are gonna basically run in a while loop whenever the running is true, because I have like this running variable here to define if my server is working or not. And every time it's true, it's gonna call a terminal, which is another class that we created here, a terminal interface, and run it. And this terminal, we basically gonna wait. If I open this this method, you're gonna wait for user input. So it's gonna block and wait to user input. And if the user types something that is not nothing new, you're gonna try to interpret this something. And in a nutshell, man, the video was so good because I was explaining everything and how this works. Leave me in the comments again if you want me to post it anyways, maybe like unlisted or something like that. But the running here, we're basically gonna try to receive the user input in the terminal. And when I'm talking about the user, I'm talking about the server administration, not the player, okay? And try to find a method inside this terminal interface class that have the same name of what the user typed. For example, the help method here, let me run the game as well. If I type help, which is the name of this function, oh, I have this, it's working. Let me just, real quick. here we go. If I type like help, I will be able to run this function from the terminal interface in the console. And this is useful because, again, the server is going to be running in a console, as I explained it earlier on, and it's good to have like controls on what's going on, what is the player, what is the list of all the player connected and stuff like that. It's important to have this. So if I type something that does not exist, you're gonna call an error saying that, hey, this is not a function of this, and I can of course keep typing different function stuffs, and I can access variables. For example, I have a test variable here in the constructor of my class that you can see here, and if I type test, it's gonna say that this is a property and it's equal to 1. If I type YouTube, that is another variable. I can see YouTube is equal to subscribe. Okay, so subscribe to this channel. And I can of course keep typing functions like quit or kill to quit the game as well. So if I type quit, it's gonna shut down the application, as you can see here. And again, the server, it's important to mention that the server is basically this. There's no interface. It's not fancy. It's just a program that is running in a machine that is of course the server. So this is basically the server. Okay, let me quit this, and this is everything that we did in the first video. Basically, we created the game server class with all the basic stuff to run, and here in the server, this is actually a subject to the second video. Don't worry, I'm gonna explain that. But we actually implement an MMO server that is a class that implements game server. Okay. It's basically for the tick. But here's the important part. Here's the entry point. And I'm basically creating an instance of my MMO server and calling run. That, again, is this method here that runs every frame and asks for user input. This is basically the first part, the first video that I recorded. So finally, the second part, the second video that I recorded, and unfortunately because of my microphone, because of me not connecting it properly, what I did is creating the first thread that you're gonna run the tick of the game. Okay, there is an interesting learning in the tick, and I'm gonna go ahead here and explain. So the first thing that I did is to create like a virtual method called tick that I will be able to implement in another class. So here I have a tick that basically counts from 0 to some number, and they have a print, that meaning that it's working, and I have a count. And the question here is like we separated that into a different function because maybe when this series finished, we may want to have another series and run that and use the same base code to create another game using these same concepts. Okay, so that's why I wanted to keep the tick separated from the rest, because in the tick we can do MMO stuff. We can like send every connected player to every other connected player, as we described earlier on, and we can do that for different specific games. Okay, so this is basically the tick. But where is the tick being called? Well, there's a lot of options that we can do, and I will try to redo what I did in the last video, okay, to explain to you as best as I can. Because the run, the main game server run, we will basically go into a while loop and run the terminal. Well, I can run the tick here, okay? That may be an option, but the problem with that is if I run the game, the tick here will only run after the administration of the server types something. So I pressed enter and it's working. Enter again, it's working. If I type like help, you're gonna print the help, and then it's working again. And of course, as a game server administration, you don't want to you don't want to have to press space every time to update the game, like 30 times a second. This is not a thing. So what happens here is that we don't call it here, but instead we create another thread like run tick. This is a method that I created, and you create another thread here that you're gonna have another while loop that you're gonna run every time the running is true, and then you're gonna call the tick every time. And again, this is another stuff that let me comment that out. We need to figure out like how many time passed since the last frame, and I'm hushing here a little bit. I'm sorry because of that, but I'm trying to explain as fast as I can what I was doing. But I basically have last tick time here in the constructor of my server that are gonna figure that we're going to store the time in seconds of the operational system that we call the tick for the last time. And why we had to do that is basically because we want after a certain amount of time to call the tick again, only after a certain amount of time. Because if we just put a while loop and call the tick here, if we just do this and forget about the rest, forget about this here real quick, okay? Just forget about that. If you just do while running call the tick, it's gonna run as fast as possible. So we're not gonna run 30 frames a second, 60 frames a second. We're gonna run as fast as possible. That's why we check the wait time. That is the amount of time that we need to wait based on the tick frequency. That is again another variable that we created. We used a lock to it and a getter and a setter here to say like, hey, this game is running at 30 frames a second, 60 frames a second, stuff like that. And then we calculate the elapsed time based in the current time minus the last tick time. And if the elapsed time is greater than the wait time, we call the tick and reset the last tick time, of course. This is good, it's gonna work. The problem, let me run the server here. And just for testing, I was using the tick frequency to 1. Yes, let me keep this as 1. So it's 1 frame per second. I'm running. Nope. Here we go. It's working again, and it's running at 1 frame per second. And you may ask, oh, this is not a lot. Like this is a very low frame rate. But there's a problem here. Let me open the window. Task manager. It's important, but don't worry about that. But the problem here is that this is actually using as much as CPU as possible, and this is literally like trying to run this code. Let me actually keep this. This will literally try to run this while loop as fast as possible. You're gonna do this calculation here, and then you're gonna check this, and if possible, you're gonna tick. If not positive here, you're gonna just continue to run the while loop, and it's gonna use 100% of your CPU, of the available CPU to it. So this is my computer is a quad core. It's gonna use like up to 25% of this core because it's gonna try to run as fast as possible. So what we need to do, the adaptation that we need to make here, and I did in the video, is to basically this is something that is commented out here. Check if the elapsed time is not enough, and if it doesn't, I'm gonna check the remaining time and make the computer sleep for that amount of time. Okay, so this is basically it. This is basically what we need to do in the run tick to finally call the tick. Okay, so this is what I did in the last like 2 videos. I'm really sorry because I can't post it. Leave in the comments if you want actually me to post it, but I think I'll just do this this summarize of what I did, and in the next video hopefully I'm not gonna make mistakes anymore and you'll be able to follow along. Okay, so that's it for this video, folks. Again, I apologize, I'm really sorry, but I see you in the next video.